Thank you so much for joining us today, Juri. Your collection of three pieces called Rondeau, Ostinato, and Fantasia for sextet will soon be performed at the opening concert of Collage New Music Concert Series this year. And we're very excited to have you here and tell us a little bit more about your work. So for the sextet, we have clarinet, saxophone, percussion, violin, cello, and harpsichord or piano. So right away, the audience would be intrigued by the instrumentation of these three pieces. So what inspired the idea of bringing saxophone and harpsichord together?
Right, so that's a great question. So the instrumentation naturally arose from the group that I was writing for.
Mm.
So these pieces were written for the sextet called Latitude 49. And they're basically a mutant piano plus percussion. So instead of the flute, they have the saxophone. And they describe themselves as something like a new music group, but with the spirit of rock band. So I kind
I
of
see.
embraced that. So not that I made any kind of rock illusion, but
Mhm.
just kind of that high-spirited ensemble that's very flexible to adapt to various styles and instrumentation. So I felt very free to explore various instruments and also styles.
For people who's only going to see the titles before the performance, Rondo, Ostinato, and Fantasia, they would surely be surprised by the music. So could you tell us what the titles are referring to in each of the pieces?
Yeah, sure. So it might be helpful to know that these pieces are actually part of a larger set. So I have another set of three pieces called contrapuntal forms, and they are fugue, cantus firmus, and canon. And all of these six pieces are using some kind of pre-existing form.
Mm.
So in this case, rondo, it's spelled Rondeau. So it's different from the classical rondo that we are more familiar with. And this is a form of medieval and Renaissance French poetry. And my treatment here is not super rigorous, but I'm taking like kind of the structure of the lines and stanzas and rhyme schemes, things like that, and making some kind of refrains in my music. And when there's like textural variations, I would make musical variations to go with those. Ostinato comes from basso ostinato, or some kind of like bass line that continues to repeat. And this was very popular in Baroque period. So usually you would have like the bass line that repeats and there will be continuous variation on top. So that's what happens in ostinato also, except that my bass line outlines an augmented fourth instead of per
Ah,
fourth.
mhm.
And that works really well with jazz illusion because I'm relentlessly doing the tritone substitution at the end of the phrases.
Mm.
And the last one, Fantasia. Fantasia is by definition kind of formless, and it's thought of as some sort of transcribed improvisation. So I'm thinking of it as like something that's a kind of mercurial, that changes in an unpredictable way. And I thought that this was a nice counterpart to the other two, which are more fixed in character.
We definitely hear a lot of humor and playfulness in your pieces.
Mhm.
So was the polystylistic approach born from a sense of musical humor?
Yeah, so that humor is a very important part of my music. And it's very insightful of you to make that connection with polystylism and humor. And of course, when you mix styles, it's going to be funny because it's bizarre and you have something that's out of place, and anything that's incongruous is inherently a little bit funny. And I recognize that as some sort of tension that I create in the
Mhm.
music. And initially, so when I first did polystylistic work, that was back in 2010, I wasn't interested in like resolving the tension. So there will be like a quoted style weird, and then I was done. But now I'm increasingly more interested in resolving this tension within the pieces. So I'm interested in like developing like more coherent harmonic language, for example, to combine these different styles. And it's kind of hard to describe why humor is so important. I've never been interested in like kind of abrasive and ridiculous kind of humor. And I always think of humor as something that's very warm and healing. which is like the ultimate purpose of music and all
Yeah.
arts, I think.
Yeah, I did find that your humor feels very sincere and it has a kind of childlike naivete with it. So yeah, I'm sure the audience will appreciate that kind of humor at our concert. Given the variety in your musical approach, I'm very curious, how did you become a composer, or how did you become the composer that you are today?
I was trained as a classical pianist initially, and I went through like conservatory training, and I always loved counterpoint harmony and this like European canon. So that's kind of like the root of me as an artist. But then I went to a grad school that really valued innovation and experimentation. And more broadly, like there's this free American spirit. So I forgot to mention I come from Korea. So I went to Illinois for grad school. So I think it's the tension between this tradition and the desire to break free from them. That's where I found my music. And I think you hear a lot of tension. And now, more importantly, the resolution in the music.
Thank you so much, Juri, for sharing your insights and stories with us today. And we look forward to hearing your pieces, Rondeau, Ostinato, and Fantasia at our upcoming Collage New Music concert on October 6th at Longy School of Music. Thank you again.